Hello, everyone, and thank you all for your attention and for joining the stream. And of course, many thanks to all the members of our community who will join later on or will watch this video in a recording. Today is, of course, 19th of May. Now it's 7 o'clock in the evening Moscow time, and I have prepared quite a number of news on some major developments. And in a minute, I will start with the news segment, but first, because this is a relatively new project, let me once again highlight that in the morning, from Monday to Friday, I will have one live stream in the morning with a morning news program, and then I will share short videos from this live stream on YouTube and Rumble channels. And in the evening, I will have evening news live stream, and on both platforms, by the way, on YouTube and Rumble. And after live stream, I will also share several news from the stream on both platforms. If this causes some confusion among members of our community, I apologize for that, but it will take probably a day or two, and we will adapt, I guess. If today, for example, some members of community were wondering where is the long video, then on Rumble, it's easy, by the way. All videos are right next to each other, but on YouTube, it's a little different. And videos that are pre-recorded are published on top, and the live stream videos are published on the bottom. And either you can just scroll and you will see all the live streams, or you can just click live and that's it. All live stream videos will open that I have ever recorded. And there is dozens and dozens of those, isn't it? So that's been said, dear friends, let's go through some news now. Some 30 minutes before I start this stream, I checked donation platforms. I checked Patreon, I checked Boosty, and others. There was no donation, no questions. So therefore, if there will be any super chat on Rumble where my channel is monetized, I will of course react on that after news segment. If not, then I will end the live stream after news segment. And so let's begin. And first of all, of course, I will report about Trump-Putin phone call that is underway right now, according to reports. Phone conversation between two presidents should started at 5 o'clock in the afternoon Moscow time. But probably it was a bit delayed. But in any ways, according to Associated Press, according to many other sources, and TASS is paying attention to it, obviously, Trump and Putin have begun phone conversation, and there is no updates yet about topics that two presidents discuss. Nothing is known. Probably later on, press service of the Russian president and also White House will share with public some additional information on that. I will right now update page. And yes, there is still nothing, by the way. Conversation between two presidents continues. But before US President Donald Trump called Russian counterpart, according to Ukrainian media outlets, Trump had a phone conversation with the Ukrainian, or with the leader of this Western-backed terrorist regime in Kiev, with Zelensky. This is reported by Rada TV channel, Ukrainian propaganda outlet, and also we have this report from Interfax news agency that before he called Russian president, and I believe it was Trump's initiative, Washington's initiative, to have this phone conversation. Trump spoke to Italy's Prime Minister Meloni, President of France Macron, Chancellor of Germany Merz, and Prime Minister of UK Starmer, basically leaders of the globalist-controlled countries in Europe. And I'm quite sure these individuals, Meloni, Macron, Merz, and Starmer, did try best they could to persuade Trump to further escalate with Russia. I'm quite sure about it, but let's go through this news. For now, US President Donald Trump held a telephone conversation yesterday with the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Italian Council of Ministers said in a press release on Monday. Meloni, along with Starmer, Macron, and Merz, had a telephone conversation with Trump last night to consult ahead of Trump's scheduled call with Russian President Vladimir Putin today. Their document said Meloni, along with their other participants in the call, expressed support for Trump's efforts to achieve just and lasting peace in Ukraine. She also stressed the need for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Of course, dear friends, globalists and their puppet regimes in Europe are still pushing for a break for their proxy regime in Kiev because they desperately need a break. Months-long break will do, as far as I can tell, based on their hysteria that is clearly visible in among European leadership, and most likely Trump will try to persuade Russian president to agree on this unconditional ceasefire. But if you ask me, I doubt that Russian president will agree on that because, as I said in today's first morning news program, negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv is already underway. Some agreements are in place. 1,000 POW should be released shortly by both sides, and both sides obligated themselves to basically present, also in a short time, detailed vision of ceasefire, implementation of the ceasefire, how and who will control this process, and so on. So work is underway, and therefore to ask Russian president right now to agree on an unconditional ceasefire, it does make no sense, especially when we all know perfectly well that globalists and their controlled regimes in Europe won't break for their proxy regime in Kiev and their forces, most importantly, that are losing ground on daily basis and big time, by the way. Right? On number of directions, Kiev regime's forces are no longer able to hold on to their positions and basically running away as soon as Russian troops advance on those directions. Right? Just yesterday, a number of media outlets reported that on the border with the Dnipropetrovsk region, this so-called elite neo-Nazi formation of Kiev regime, Aidar, actually ran away as soon as Russian troops advance on their direction. And this is not some separate occurrence. Similar stuff is happening on other directions also. So therefore, talk between Russian president and the US president will be difficult, as far as I can tell. Maybe even very difficult. And in my personal opinion, I think we should expect a significant escalation from Washington after this phone conversation. Most likely, US will, act more like Biden's administration was acting, at least for time being. Although I hope I am wrong, by the way. I hope I'm missing something, and U.S. leadership is serious about the escalation, but I don't know. Probably we are about to see significant escalation from the Western side. Meanwhile, Kommersant newspaper is also reporting that Vice President of U.S. J.D. Vance had spoke about this phone conversation that was planned between or arranged between U.S. president and the Russian president. He shared his opinion on all this Ukrainian crisis. Let's go through some details, what he had to say. I guess this is important to understand a little better how Putin-Trump conversation might take place or end. So U.S. Vice President JDW said that peace talks on Ukraine had reached something of a stalemate. He warned that unless Russia was involved in a peace process, Americans would have to stop their efforts to achieve peace. Mr. Vance also noted that Russian President Vladimir Putin did not fully understand how to resolve this crisis in Ukraine, and I think this is a very premature statement on part of J.D. Vance. He should understand that maybe he being called in U.S. future president, but I mean, he is a lightweight, and Russian president is a heavyweight, right? And I don't think J.D. Vance is in a position to say that Putin did not understand how to resolve the crisis in Ukraine. I mean, this is this statement clearly demonstrates how immature and not really ready for high-ranking position J.D. Vance is, in my personal opinion. Share your take, dear friends, what you think. But anyways, let's go through some more details in this news. So we have a quote from Vance here. We understand that there is some impause in a situation, some sort of a pause. And I think the president, Donald Trump, is going to say to the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, look, are you serious? Are you serious about this? Mr. Vance told reporters, noting that he had just spoken with Donald Trump. Well, I mean, yet again, is this language which should be used there, this extremely unofficial way to communicate with Russian president? I don't think so. So if I was advisor to Trump, I would tell to him that, you know what, just be extremely respectful, because before you is a president of a nuclear superpower and heavyweight, one of the few heavyweights that is still left in this world when it comes to politics and the geopolitics. So I don't think U.S. president are gonna talk with the Russian president if they are like childhood friends and, you know, are you serious about it? Or no, this is not the way to go for sure. But anyways, dear friends, as I already said, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump will hold their phone conversation. We're planned to hold phone conversation on May 19th today. It was scheduled for 1700 hours or 5 o'clock in the afternoon Moscow time. And if a conversation between the two presidents started exactly at 5 o'clock, which is, I guess, 10 a.m. in Washington, then it's more than 2 hours now that presidents are talking. Before I end this stream, dear friends, I will check once again for any updates. If there will be additional information, of course, I will share this with you. But this is what Vance was saying. And yes, I'm a bit disappointed because I was expecting that he will be a bit more heavy in his judgment and in his language, a bit more serious. But I mean, this comes with experience, I guess. I don't know what else to say. Anyways, dear friends, TASS News Agency is reporting that official spokeswoman of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, once again commented on Ukrainian crisis and on the Russian stance when it comes to resolution of the Ukrainian crisis. Russia in Ukraine talks follows principles set forward by Russian President Putin in 2024. Maria Zakharova stated, let's go through some more details. Russia in talks on Ukrainian settlement follows their position as set forward by Russian President Vladimir Putin in June 2024. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said in the comments on the outcome of meeting in Turkey, the position of our country was clearly articulated by Russian President Vladimir Putin on June 14, 2024. Look at how our country, in a systematic, principled, and logical manner, has been acting in line with these guidelines, she told reporters on the sidelines of the St. Petersburg International Legal Forum. According to the diplomat, Moscow is showing responsible position based on international law, the interests of the country, and stability and security of their entire region. The spokeswoman said the Kiev regime, on the other hand, has often changed its position. It was evident even from their Istanbul talks alone, one thing in the morning and another in the evening, and still another the next morning. And it is like that all the time, Zakharova said, while commenting on behavior and of the Kiev regime during this recent and Kiev regime's representatives. First of all, Zelensky, by the way, during this recent talks in Istanbul between Russia and Ukrainian delegations, and she is absolutely correct. One day, Zelensky said one thing in the morning. In the afternoon, he said something different. Next day, also something different. And how are you going to deal with people like that? That can change their position, their stance, literally on our base. I mean, this is, some crazy stuff, isn't it? And just to remind you, dear friends, Putin in June 2024 named the conditions for talks with Ukraine, which included withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Donbass and Novorossiya, and to Kiev's aspirations to join NATO, lifting all Western sanctions against Moscow, and Ukraine's commitment to uphold non-aligned and non-nuclear status and fully respect the rights, freedoms, and interests of its Russian-speaking citizens. For now, none of this is met, right? None of this principal stance that Russia has and the Russian president outlined in 2024 is met. So therefore, I'm skeptical that today's phone conversation between Trump and Putin will be much of a success. Representatives of two presidents, maybe even presidents, probably will say that conversation afterwards, that conversation was interesting, and they will praise each other, maybe, and that's about it. I don't think anything realistic gonna come out of these talks, because clearly Washington is not yet ready to confront globalists openly, and therefore Washington is not yet ready to acknowledge defeat of the globalists, defeat of the collective West in this proxy war against Russia, and to agree on the concessions before Russia. And until this is the case, one should not expect some breakthroughs, really, either on the ground or on the political or geopolitical stage. Let's continue with some more news. And TASS news agency is reporting that press spokesman of the Russian president was asked, Dmitry Peskov was asked about possible meeting, face-to-face meeting between Trump and Putin, and he said that such a meeting is not yet in preparations, understandably so, because yet again, I find it difficult to understand what two presidents gonna talk today during this phone conversation. I mean, they can exchange opinions about many topics, okay? Ukrainian crisis, Iran nuclear deal, some other major events in this world, but that's about it, I guess, right? Maybe Trump will try to, talk with the Russian side about some potential economical cooperation between the two countries and so on. But yet again, when it comes to Ukrainian crisis, as long as there are globalists, as long as the Western ruling class is not ready to acknowledge defeat and agree on the concessions, one shouldn't expect any breakthroughs. And if U.S. leadership is, stands are strong enough, at least inside U.S., then they should start confronting globalists openly and really walk away from all this bloody tragedy that globalists provoked, while using U.S. as their main enforcer, because they were in charge of U.S., isn't it, at the moment? But if U.S. stance are not strong enough, if U.S. administration stance are not strong enough, then these talks will have no actual meaning or result. RIA Novosti, meanwhile, is reporting that Bloomberg reported what Trump might decide to do after talking with Putin. So U.S. President Donald Trump might agree to impose crushing sanctions against Russia as proposed by Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Bloomberg reports, citing European officials, Trump is considering approving the sanctions bill if Russia does not make concessions, the article says. I mean, do you see, dear friends, that clearly leadership of US is in some parallel universe? They don't really understand or pretend maybe that they don't understand what is going on in reality, because if any one side has to agree on the concessions, it's US and it's collective West, not Russia. And they might threaten us with whatever sanctions, whatever actions they want. It will not change our stance, and it will only further deteriorate position of very same West, US included. So, okay, as I said in the beginning, dear friends, most likely that's exactly what is going to happen. After these talks, Washington probably will start acting more like Biden's administration was doing, extremely hostile, and that will last for quite some time until Russia will achieve unconditional victory on the battlefield. And in that case, we might see the escalation when Russian troops will either reach borders of the Western Ukraine, or maybe even borders of Poland, Hungary, Romania, and so on, Slovakia. Ball is on the Western side. If they want to continue, okay, Russia is ready. And the Russian president was very clear on that Russia has all the resources needed to achieve all the goals that special military operation has. But if West is ready to truly de-escalate, then Moscow is open for that also. But I mean, Western representatives have to be realistic. They have to find in themselves courage to face the reality and acknowledge that they lost. They tried hard. They sacrificed entire nation, entire country, Ukraine, and millions of people, right? And they lost still. And they have to acknowledge this. Kommersant newspaper is also reporting that EU is proposing to G7 to further lower Russian oil price ceiling to 50% per barrel. So European Union will propose to the G7 finance ministers to lower their price ceiling for Russian seaborne oil from $60 to $50 per barrel. Reuters reports, citing EU officials, G7 finance ministers will meet this week in Canada, and this is also another step that collective West might take. US might impose additional sanctions, EU might impose additional sanctions, also UK and other countries from the collective West, and also G7 countries may go ahead with this decision to further low price ceiling on Russian oil. As if $60 for a barrel did work, by the way. It did not work, isn't it? And even Japan, G7 member, was buying Russian oil at $70 for a barrel at one point. But right now, prices on oil are lower than it was before, right? And if Russia is selling its oil around, I don't know, $55, $60 per barrel at this point, this is not because this price ceiling is working, but because that's the situation on our energy markets, right? Oil prices are significantly lower now than it was a year ago. It has nothing to do with the EU price ceiling. But will these people understand that are formally in charge of collective West? Will they realize this? I don't know. I don't think so. So they might go ahead actually with this decision. Who cares, really? Commerçant newspaper, meanwhile, is reporting that EU agrees on a 150 billion euro militarization fund. Okay, EU member states, or taxpayers from EU member states, will have to pay even more to enrich military-industrial complex and corrupt officials. Okay, ambassadors of the European Union countries have agreed on the EU militarization fund proposed by the European Commission. IFP report citing diplomats' decision on the 150 billion euro fund was made on the evening of May 18, yesterday evening, basically. It should help Europe, according to statements of Brussels bureaucrats, to rearm itself in the face of Russian threat and concerns about the reliability of the United States. Of course, they're going to use this mythical Russian threat always and in every decision, every questionable decision, because that's the way that they are justifying literally anything at this point, stealing hundreds of billions of euros from taxpayers. I mean, no problem. It's a Russian threat, so people be quiet, right? It's Russians, either Russians or aliens gonna attack us today or tomorrow. So therefore, you don't need this money. We do, so we will take it. That's basically what they are doing, and quite openly, isn't it? And because there is no huge opposition to such behavior from European bureaucracy, I'm becoming more and more skeptical that majority of societies in European countries will ever be able to wake up. It is what it is. Vzglyad newspaper, meanwhile, special military operation continues, dear friends, of course, and Vzglyad newspaper is reporting that Russian troops liberated Marina settlement in the Sumy region, right? This settlement located right next to border with the Kursk region, and also Russian troops liberated Novo Alenovka settlement in the DPR. This information is confirmed by Russian Defense Ministry today, and let me show you on the map location of this settlement. So this is Marina, by the way, not far away from where Kursk salient was at one point, which was occupied by Kiev regimes and forces and NATO mercenaries. But now, of course, this territory is liberated from enemy, and Russian troops began creating a buffer zone in the Sumy region itself. And well, this is Marina settlement, which is my bad, dear friends. It's not far away from Kursk region, but geographically it's located like on like right on the border between Belgorod and Kursk region. So this is Marina settlement, which is under full Russian control. It's a Sumy region, of course. And also, let me show you this another settlement, which is on the northern eastern flank of Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration. This is Novo Alenovka settlement, dear friends, which is under full Russian control, according to Defense Ministry. And Russian troops in this direction had huge progress, by the way, in recent 12 to 24 hours. And seems like Kiev regime's forces are collapsing, literally collapsing in this area, and are running away. They are unable to maintain their positions. And also, by the way, number of sources are reporting that Russian troops liberated Romanovka settlement, although this information not yet confirmed by Defense Ministry of Russia. Probably tomorrow or day after, the Russian Defense Ministry will confirm this information too. Okay, that's been said. Let's continue with some more news, and this is also important. According to Vzglyad newspaper's report, Ukraine has announced evacuation from 202 settlements in the Sumy region. I just mentioned Sumy region, and that Marina settlement is located in the Sumy, right next to Belgorod and Kursk region. And we are receiving this report now that Kiev regime has decided to carry out an emergency evacuation of their population from more than 200 settlements, 202 to be more precise, in the Sumy region. The head of the Ukrainian military administration of the region, Oleg Grigoryev, announced. So this is a big deal, isn't it? Basically, almost, I would not say full Sumy region, entire Sumy region, but significant part of Sumy region, especially on the borderline areas, are going to be evacuated. And this information probably indicates that Turkey regime's positions in the Sumy region is so weak that they expect Russian troops to advance much more rapidly in this direction than before. And that's why evacuation has been announced. Let's see how the situation will develop. But dear friends, nowadays many experts are talking about upcoming Russian large-scale summer offensive, and experts are speculating in which direction this offensive may take place. Some are saying that Russian troops may actually conduct a sectoral or even larger scale operation in Kherson direction, Zaporozhye direction, or Sumy and Chernigov directions. By the way, some experts even mentioning Kharkiv. I don't know personally. Russian general staff is not sharing information with me, and therefore, I'm just observing the situation and reporting whenever there is an important development that I see in the news. But I would not be surprised for sure if we will see simultaneous Russian sectoral scale offensive operations in several directions. It might be Kherson and Zaporozhye, and also Sumy and Chernigov regions, maybe even Kharkiv region, by the way. And Russian troops, one should keep in mind, that are literally on the border with the Dnipropetrovsk region, right? In many areas. So even though Dnipropetrovsk region not being mentioned that so much as other regions, other directions, but why should anybody be surprised if Russia will launch a sectoral scale offensive to liberate Dnipropetrovsk region? It is a possibility, isn't it? But anyways, information itself that more than 200 settlements in Sumy region in order to evacuate by Kyiv regime is quite important. And when it comes to activity of Kyiv regime, dear friends, today I shared on my Telegram and Twitter X page short video of destruction of yet another armored group of Kyiv regime that was trying to break into Kursk region. I don't understand, and hardly anyone understands, why Kyiv regime is still sending on this suicidal mission its troops to break into Russian territory, but they do. Kyiv regime does it on regular basis. And in this video, by the way, I'm not going to open it now, but you can check it on my Telegram or Twitter. And in this video, you can see that there was an armored group that was based on 2 infantry fighting vehicles. It was Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, by the way. And there was, I guess, at least platoon of Kyiv regime's forces were trying to get into Russian territory, and these Bradleys were destroyed right on the border. One Bradley's ammo was, detonated at one point, and almost nothing was left from the vehicle. It burned out completely, and another one just was knocked out, and probably will be evacuated by Russian engineering forces, and we might see that Bradley somewhere in a military museum in a short time, as there are many other vehicles, by the way, especially NATO vehicles that are already being transferred to many museums in Russian territory as trophies. TASS news agency, meanwhile, is reporting about news that you definitely not gonna hear in the Western media outlets, dear friends. Investigative committee of the Russian Federation has established the death of more than 620 civilians during the shelling of Russian territory by Ukrainian armed forces. Investigators have established the death of more than 620 civilians as a result of shelling of Russian territory by Ukrainian side. This was reported by the head of Russian Investigative Committee, Alexander Bastrykin. We have quotes here. According to investigations, as a result of shelling of Russian territory, 621 civilians were killed, including 38 children, and at least 3,217 people were injured, to varying degrees of severity, including 249 minors. So more than 3,000 people were injured, and this injury was different, obviously. Some was heavy, some was maybe not, but numbers are colossal, isn't it? This was reported by Basrikin at the St. Petersburg International Legal Forum. The head of investigative committee also noted that since the beginning of their armed conflict, about 7,000 people have died and almost 18,500 civilians have been injured. So unfortunately, in this first part of this report, there is no information in which period. Is this 2025 or 2024 and 2025? Because after that, the head of investigative committee shared more information that since the beginning of the armed conflict, about 7,000 people have died and almost 18,500 civilians have been injured. The main cause of civilian casualties was the shelling of civilian infrastructure facilities by representatives of the Kiev regime that were using high explosive weapons, small arms, and light weapons, mainly foreign-made. The head of investigative committee noted, according to him, investigators of the investigative committee have opened more than 3,000 criminal cases after Ukrainian militants shelled Russian territories. So, as I said, dear friends, I don't think any Western media outlet ever going to report about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of civilians, actually, that were killed on Russian territory as a result of shelling by Kiev regime, as a result of terrorist activity of this Zelensky's regime or Kiev regime. Hopefully, Russian investigators will manage to bring to the justice all those criminals that were involved in these terrorist attacks. And few more news, dear friends, before I end this live stream. A few more news about some economical topics. RIA Novosti is reporting that Russia discusses Chinese companies' entry into oil and gas projects. The entry of the Chinese companies into oil and gas production projects in Russia continues to be discussed. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak told journalists, asked whether there was a progress in negotiations on the entry of Chinese companies into oil and gas production projects in Russia. He said a meeting took place recently. We discussed these negotiations will continue. So I guess there is no huge progress in this regard. Otherwise, probably Novak would respond with some factual information that there is agreement for cooperation in this project and that project, but probably talks are ongoing. And at some point, I guess some agreements will be reached between the sides. Also, TASS News Agency is reporting that Russia is ready to build up oil supplies to China via Kazakhstan by 2.5 million tons. This information also comes from Novak. So Russia is ready to increase oil supplies to China via Kazakhstan by 2.5 million tons. Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak told the reporters this is a proposal from the Chinese side, and accordingly we are ready to ensure such supplies. But for this, certain technological solutions will need to be implemented through Kazakhstan. Certain measures must be taken in the area of pipeline transport. I think Transneft, Russian oil pipeline operator, will have to form an exact list of measures. We are currently working on it. Earlier, the Russian government approved a draft protocol on amendments to their intergovernmental agreement with China, which provides for the possibility of increasing Russian oil supplies to China by 2.5 million tons. And dear friends, I guess you're already thinking what I'm thinking, which is that China is trying to sort of secure itself, its economy, in case Israel, US, and their allies will go ahead and start a war against Iran, which will obviously shut down navigation in the Persian Gulf, and in that case, China will lose a significant volume of oil imports from the Middle East, from the Gulf region, and one of the ways China may try to, ensure its economy is to, ask for more oil supplies from Russia, and their work is clearly done in this direction. But I guess this topic of significant, I will say, increase of Russian oil supplies to China will be dependent in some ways on cooperation of Russian and Chinese energy companies in some other sectors also, because as I said, dear friends, quite a few times in my previous updates, right now China is in a position when Beijing don't really have much to offer on strategical terms when it comes to relationships with Russia. I'm not talking about some basic stuff. I mean, pens and pencils and I don't know, notebooks and phones and that kind of stuff. No, I'm talking about strategical level of cooperation in economy, in energy sector or in other sectors. Excuse me. And this is a huge issue for China, especially now, because I guess Beijing miscalculated overall situation in regards to Russia and on a geopolitical scale, basically, because probably Chinese leadership was thinking that due to this proxy war that West is engaged against Russia, including US, Russia is sort of in a weak position, so that China will force Russia during the negotiations to agree on extremely unbeneficial for Russian side agreements. For example, China was pushing for extremely low prices on the gas to agree on building of Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, and Russian side didn't agree, and that's supposed to be a good enough signal for Beijing that they should change their strategy, but they did not. They did not. And therefore, now they find themselves in a situation when they cannot really offer much on strategical terms to Russia, while US, which is still engaged in this proxy war against Russia, actually considering to pull out from this conflict at some point. And that will mean that US will agree on concessions also, and already talks are on the way in Washington, and I guess between Washington and Moscow also, about a possibility that US companies, US energy companies, will buy Russian gas, Russian oil, and will transfer and basically resell this gas and oil for the start, by the way. They will resell Russian oil to European countries. Can China do something like that right now? No, because there is no infrastructure in the place. China lost a number of years, by the way. This Power of Siberia 2 pipeline should be operational by now, but it's still largely on the paper. And same can be said about number of pipelines that's supposed to transit Russian oil to China. So a bigger misstep on part of Beijing, I think, in this regard, and they're going to rush now. I think they're going to rush now, and they're going to change their negotiating position, and they're probably in a relatively short time we will start receiving more and more news about agreements between Moscow and China, or between Russian and Chinese energy companies on some massive projects. But currently, I mean, it sounds maybe surprising, but US is actually in a better position than China is when it comes to these geopolitical energy policies, geopolitics and their energy policies and so on. And one may ask her, why would Russia cooperate with US to sell oil and gas to Europe, even if through third party, US, for example. And many people are asking why Russia is still selling anything at all to Western countries. And the answer is not simple, but I think quite understandable. Point is that even though Russian energy companies are, and other businesses, by the way, are trying to diversify, EU was their biggest trade partner for Russia, bigger than China, by the way, twice bigger than China at some point, right? And of course, it does take time, years in many cases, to truly diversify these sectors of their economy, so that dependence on Europe will be minimized or nullified. And meanwhile, to make sure that Russian companies are working, to make sure that there is some income is coming, right? To make sure that jobs are secured, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of jobs actually are secured, to make sure that social fabric is stable. Russia has to do business still with their number of European countries, even hostile ones. That's just how it is, right? And if US, after Washington will pull out this country from this proxy war and agrees on the concessions before Russia, if US companies will, come up with their proposal that they're gonna invest in the Nord Stream pipelines, and by the way, EU is not happy about these ideas that are circulating in the media, in Washington, in Moscow. They're gonna impose additional sanctions on Nord Streams, and I reported about it a couple of days ago, isn't it? In recent updates. And for example, if American companies invest to rebuild their Nord Stream pipelines that are damaged due to US attacks on them, right? If US companies will take over pipeline network on Kyiv controlled territory, and then if US will buy Russian gas and also Russian oil, by the way, and resell it to Europe, making good buck on that, basically, I think Russia will take this offer. Exactly what I just said, because Russia, after all, needs some stable income, right? And most importantly, it's not even about money, by the way. It's about jobs. It's about infrastructure. Because if you are not able to sell all your gas, then you have to shut down dozens and dozens of infrastructure, isn't it? Your infrastructure gonna suffer. Gas infrastructure, oil infrastructure, and so on. So therefore, you need to maintain constant sales of the volumes of their energy or whatever other goods you are selling, to make sure that industries are working, infrastructure is in a place and developing, and most importantly, thousands and thousands of jobs are safe and secure, and the social fabric is not under pressure, right? And that's why I'm saying Beijing lost so many years, by the way. I couldn't understand how they could miscalculate this big, but they did. And they're gonna rush now. Because do they really have any options? No. And now Russian companies may actually do the same to Chinese energy companies, demand higher prices, higher than Russian companies will demand if Chinese businesses, Chinese energy companies would agree to build up energy network like 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. It is what it is. Meanwhile, TASS news agency is reporting that Russians consider China, Belarus, India to be the friendliest countries. The latest survey shows. So over 60% of Russians believe that Russia has their friendliest and the strongest relations with China and closely cooperates with Belarus and India, according to poll conducted by the Russian public opinion researcher Tsiom. Okay, by the way, 60% is mistaken, I will say, on this, because I think Belarus is cannot be even in a competition, because Belarus is our brothers, right, and sisters. I mean, we all are from Soviet Union, isn't it? Former Soviet Union. So Belarus is number one. There can be no questions about that, right? India, if it comes to these three countries, India is definitely ahead of China, in my personal opinion, because I strongly believe that Russia-India relationships are tremendously important for world security, not just for security of Russia and India, but for the world security. And I have many, many reasons to believe in that. And when it comes to relationships with China, it's a good partnership that is on a strategical level, I will say. But one should keep in mind that this was not always like that, and the Western world was using China against Soviet Union for decades and decades, right? And probably they were hoping to use China against Russia even after Soviet Union collapsed, but it didn't turn out that way. But history lessons should be learned and should be remembered, right? Many people maybe don't know, but China had a war with Vietnam, and Vietnam was Soviet ally, right? At one point in 50s, by the way, Chinese troops even attacked Russian territory, Soviet territory, on Amur River. And it didn't end well for Chinese troops, but it did happen, right? Also, by the way, China was financing and supplying with weapons all their Mujahideen forces in Afghanistan, Taliban, and from those forces, Taliban was eventually created, right? Which is in power now in Afghanistan, and therefore, I wouldn't be surprised if there is still some connections between Kabul and Beijing. But according to some experts, by the way, during their when Soviet forces entered Afghanistan, U.S. was financing and supporting or supplying with weapons about 20% from overall volume of these Mujahideen forces that was fighting against Soviet troops, against our soldiers, and 80% was coming from China. And there is many other examples in history, by the way, when relationships between Moscow and Beijing was not really on top of the game, let's say, not really as friendly as one would like. So therefore, these 60% of people are mistaken, I believe. Belarus is definitely, it's not even a competition. India is a strategical partner, I will say number one strategical partner. China, from these three countries, okay, after India, I can place China as a strategical partner. It might be situative partnership right now, but still it is a partnership, right? At least we are not hostile, which is a good change, right? Because as I said, during the Soviet era, there was a very different relationship between the sides. And sometime after Soviet Union collapsed. Anyways, dear friends, this is it for a news segment of today's update. On PayPal, I just received during the live stream a donation of $10. From Les. Thank you very much for your donation, Les. There is no commentary, no question. Otherwise, I would of course try my best to be informative while reacting on the question. Thank you very much. And also, dear friends, our moderator on Rumble, Banzo Beans, commented. Thank you, John. Thank you, Banzo, for your donation, for your support. This is to celebrate the first spammer invading your Rumble live stream. Another milestone reached. Oh, really? I'm gonna check out. Thank you, John, for helping me, for support that you are providing. Truly grateful, dear friend. And well, I guess I can end a live stream now. Hopefully tomorrow, there will be more questions or comments through different platforms that I can highlight. But today's it is what it is. I hope you find this update interesting, dear friends, informative. And before I go, I almost forget, dear friends. I should check updates on Putin-Trump phone conversation, isn't it? So let me come back for a second, and I will read it. So just a sec, dear friends. Let's go back to this news here. So Putin made a statement. Russia ready to work with Ukraine on memorandum on a future peace treaty. So Russia is ready to work with Ukraine on a memorandum on a future peace treaty, which may also include issues of ceasefire and principles for resolving the conflict. Russian President Vladimir Putin told the journalists this follows a phone conversation with American leader Donald Trump. And we have quote here, Russia will propose and is ready to work with Ukrainian side on a memorandum regarding a possible future peace treaty with their definition of a number of positions, such as, for example, the principles of settlement, the timing of the possible peace agreement, and so on, including a possible ceasefire for a certain period if the relevant agreements are reached, Putin said. Basically, dear friends, this is exactly what I said in the beginning, that we shouldn't expect any breakthroughs. This is a diplomatic statement that Moscow is open for talks, for negotiations. As it was expected, Moscow was always open for talks, by the way, and for a long-term sustainable peace, right? It was a collective West that was pushing for further prolongation of this proxy war that they are waging against Russia. So therefore, in this regard, Moscow's position has not changed. Moscow's principal stands are the same as it was in 2022, 2023, 4, and now. And well, I'm interested what American side will say after this conversation between Russian president and US president. As I said in the beginning, I would not be surprised at all if Washington will start escalating big time. Although once again, we should keep in mind that there is a clearly off ramp for US that Washington can use to walk away really and pull out US from this proxy war. And I really hope they will use it. I really hope they will say at one point that this is not their war and US should never be involved in this proxy war, and they're gonna walk away and pull out country from this bloody tragedy that globalists provoke. So there is, and therefore I think there is a possibility for both scenarios. Let's see. I mean, US leadership, it's up to them now. Would they decide to escalate with Russia and get involved further in this proxy war and basically act on behalf of globalists, or will they choose their other path towards through de-escalation, and if they will pull out US from this proxy war, then agree on a concession before Russia and will start cooperating, not fighting with Russia. We will find out soon, dear friends. This is it for now. I really hope you find this episode informative and useful. Have a wonderful day and take care. Thank you very much once again.